a faster permitting process that takes 2 years instead of 10 years and maybe less. We're looking to get it down to 1 year, if possible, because when the money goes out, we want them to be able to spend the money, not wait around for many, many years while they get their permits. $50 billion for rural infrastructure, including broadband internet access. Rural communities have not been treated fairly. So we're going to spend $50 billion on rural infrastructure and internet access, which is so important. A workforce initiative that invests in our most valuable resource, the American worker. And we're doing a lot of that. We had a meeting, I had a phone call this morning with Prime Minister Abe of Japan, and I suggested that he invests more and open up more plants. They announced, as you know, a number of plants are coming in to Michigan and other states, but we want them to bring in more. And they will do that. He said they will do that, and we would expect to have some announcements pretty soon. We have a lot of companies are moving in. A lot of people are coming into the United States. They were leaving, and now they're coming in. All good for our workers and good for our country. More power for state and local governments to choose projects. We want them to choose the projects they want, the most important projects, because they know best the needs of their people. So we want the states to be very much involved in the choice of where this money goes. After spending trillions of dollars overseas rebuilding other countries, it is time to rebuild our own country and to take care of our citizens. The money that we've spent overseas, not to mention in the Middle East, where as of 2 months ago we had spent $7 trillion. And yet, if we have to fix a road, we can't fix it. If we have to fix a tunnel, we don't do it because we don't have the money. We spend $7 trillion in the Middle East. It's ridiculous. The American people expect all of us to work together to serve their needs. This is an issue where I really believe we can find common ground between Republicans and Democrats. It's the infrastructure issue. It's something great for our country. It's something that our country needs. And again, we have Democrats here. We have Republicans here. We've had other meetings. We will have meetings in the future, including new meetings with this group. There's a very capable group of people, and I think we're going to come up ultimately with a solution to the infrastructure of our country, which is in very poor condition. We're extremely happy with the bill that was passed because we had to take care of our military. Our military was in bad shape. Now we've had the biggest spending ever, and our military will be stronger than it's ever been before. We needed that. I want to cut costs, but we needed that. Now I want to spend that money on the military wisely. I want to see if we can get twice the planes for half the price, essentially. We're going to make sure we buy maximum equipment and other things with the dollar, not that it's going to be wasted. So our military will be in better shape than ever before. And now what we're going to do is have our discussion. So we appreciate it. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Mr. President, did your staff have a
Twice the price for half the cost, he said, as the president promises to rebuild our bridges, highways, and airports.
One of the many promises that he made, and he is following through on, and obviously that is our nation's infrastructure in need of it. Thank you so much for joining us. Outnumbered starts right now.
Take care.
Fox News Alert now. The House Oversight Committee is investigating the White House response to revelations of multiple allegations of domestic abuse against former top staffer Rob Porter. The question, who knew what about it and when? New testimony from FBI Director Christopher Wray appears to contradict the administration's version of events on that issue. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here today of co-host of After the Bell on Fox Business, Melissa Francis. Anchor of the Intelligence Report, also on FBN, Trish Regan is here. Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov. And in the center seat, Outnumbered, Fox and Friends Weekend co-host Pete Hegseth. Salute him. And you know what?
Good morning.
Sometimes we profess love on this Valentine's Day with candy and cards. Some of us profess love through our dedication to the country. Show them.
Oh, come on. A little love of country. What? Why can't we do a little American
Do you see
flag?
that lining?
That is amazing. And as I said to you, it's not even the 4th of July.
Because every day
Well, in our
is the
hearts.
4th of July.
It is.
In our hearts.
Right? Hey.
Happy Valentine's Day to you ladies as
Thanks,
well.
Rebecca.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
Okay, we'll move on. New testimony from the FBI Director Chris Wray conflicts with a White House timeline of events regarding when they were informed about accusations against Rob Porter. The FBI says its review of Porter was closed in January administratively. The White House said the process was still ongoing when Porter resigned in February. Yesterday, the White House press secretary addressed the discrepancy.
The FBI portion was closed. The White House Personnel Security Office, who is the one that makes a recommendation for adjudication, had not finished their process and therefore not made a recommendation to the White House. There's multiple groups here. The White House Personnel Security Office, which is staffed by career officials, may have received information, but they had not completed their process.
House Speaker Paul Ryan weighed in on the situation earlier, saying there was some sort of failure.
Clearly, we should all be condemning domestic violence. And if a person who commits domestic violence gets in government, then there's a breakdown in the system. There's a breakdown in the vetting system, and that breakdown needs to be addressed.
Meanwhile, sources tell Fox News the White House is not currently working to replace Chief of Staff John Kelly, despite some reports. This, as Kelly tells the Wall Street Journal, he would not change his handling of the Porter situation at all. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live at the White House. John?
Harris, good afternoon to you. The White House has had trouble coming up with a consistent explanation for this, and we are now on day 8 of this scandal. When it first broke a week ago today, the White House did all it could, at least as much as it could, to try to put out the initial fire, hold that fire line for a while, but then the White House quickly became overwhelmed again. And yesterday it got taken up to another notch when FBI Director Christopher Wray took the extraordinary step in a congressional hearing of throwing the White House under the bus, laying out a timeline that contradicted what the press secretary had been saying for the previous 6 days. So far, the White House has been fortunate in that it has only had to explain what happened to the news media, but now it's going to have to explain it to a congressional committee headed by a Republican. South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy sending a letter to the Chief of Staff John Kelly here at the White House asking for policies, practices, and procedures for interim security clearances, whether Rob Porter's clearances, interim and final, were consistent with those procedures, the date when the White House became aware of the allegations against Porter, and the dates of Porter's security clearance adjudication. Trey Gowdy saying that he's got a lot of questions that he wants answered. Listen here.
I would want to know from Don McGahn and General Kelly and anyone else, what did you know? From whom did you hear it? To what extent did you hear it? And then what actions, if any, did you take? The chronology is not favorable for the White House. When you have the head of the FBI saying, we told you 3 times in 2017 and once more in 2018 for good measure, then I think the really fair questions are, what were you told? By whom were you told it? Did you have some reason to question what the Bureau told you? And if none of that is true, why did you keep him on?
Now to what Congressman Gowdy was saying, a lot of questions unanswered by the White House. What was contained in the information that the FBI sent to the White House Personnel Security Office in March, July, November, and earlier this month? And because the FBI was informed about the worst of the domestic abuse allegations way back in January of 2017, did the FBI ever tell the president or senior staff about it? You were mentioning, Harris, that there were some rumors flying around last night that John Kelly may not be long for the White House. Sources both inside and outside the White House say that's not true. He's not going anywhere. And in fact, there were some discussions and suggestions last night that maybe at the daily briefing today, the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and the White House counsel, Don McGahn, would come out to address the press on all of this. Last time I checked, the decision on that had not been made, but as the briefing is scheduled for about 56 minutes from now, we will find out. Actually, 53 minutes from now. Terrible at math. We will find out soon. Harris?
For the record, I didn't say rumors. I said reporting. There's a big difference.
That's true.
I'll say that on that. John Roberts, thank you very much. Pete Hegseth, it's been 8+ days on this, which, regardless of what the subject matter is, when a White House communications department is focused on an issue that is negative for the White House for 8 days, what does that tell you?
Well, it means at some level it wasn't handled the way that it should have. But I got to tell you this. If you talk to I'm not here to defend Rob Porter. I'm certainly never here to defend. No, and I would never be here to defend.
We don't know
of
all
course,
the facts.
or anyone who's involved in domestic abuse at all. So that's on the table completely. But did Rob Porter not get fired? And did the White House not take action? And he doesn't work there anymore, does he? I mean, ultimately, the consequences came down the pike. Why are we still talking about this at the level we are?
Pop off her shoulders
later?
right now.
Listen, I just think it's a process story that Washington is obsessed with. This guy got canned because he should have. Rest of America wants to know what we're doing about China. They want to know what we're doing on infrastructure. If we're going to get DACA fixed and a wall built, that's what people care about. I'm just saying. I mean, this story. My goodness.
So I may surprise you on this, Harris, because I agree
I'm always
with you
surprised.
in that this is a giant distraction right now that we do not need, because there are many other things that are far more important. Now, was it handled as well as it could have been, should have been? No. I mean, I think that the president probably should have just gotten ahead of this, come right out and said, and listen, I understand, and Jessica and I were talking about this. He's making the point that we don't know all the facts, and so, you can't just automatically believe any accusation that's out there. So he could have said, look, he says he's innocent, but I just want to make it very clear to everyone listening right now. There is no room in our society for any kind of domestic abuse, and any kind of man that would lay one hand on a woman is the worst kind of, most vile person ever, and leave it at that. The guy's gone. Let's move on to important stuff.
I want to get to Lindsey Graham real quickly, and forgive me, Jessica. Let's watch the Senator Graham on the issue.
In this case, you had a protective order that's given by a court, and the person who seeks the order has to prove to a judge that there's a reason for it. You have a photo of a black guy. So I think it would serve the president well to stand up more aggressively against domestic violence. And this is a moment to say it's not going to be tolerated. There's a consequences to domestic violence, even for somebody who went to Harvard.
So, Jessica, the question that I've had all along is how many she's does it say to have to say something for you to take a look at something closer? There are 3 she saids versus 1 he said. I just point that out. Go.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, I would love it if the president had said that. I would love it if the president had said that about a Roy Moore and talked about the accusations against him in that type of way. But it's not just, oh, they heard about it and then they fired him. Christopher Wray yesterday blew huge holes in the White House's story about the timeline here. He made it very clear. Yes. About what more hard evidence do you need than a picture of a woman's black eye? The testimony of 3 women. As Harris said there, you have 3 she saids here and 1 he said. The case was closed for the FBI last month. Sarah Sanders lied. Raj Shah lied up there on the podium. They said it was still ongoing. It wasn't. It was closed for the FBI.
Well, let me stop in right there.
He hadn't decided whether to give him a clearance yet. He had an interim clearance. The process as to whether or not he got a clearance. Again, you're saying this lie. There's a lot of processes here.
A lot of process to all conversation, though, because I do think, and we know from reporting that when we speak the word lie, we need to have every fact to back that up, and I don't think that we have all the facts, but it is possible that people are wrong, which aren't necessarily mutually exclusive.
I mean, people who have dissected the timeline, you look at it, it makes you wonder, what did John Kelly know when? And I think that's why we have Trey Gowdy saying, I want to know how this happened. Walk me through step by step who knew what when, and at what point did someone drop the ball? Because obviously someone did. It's just a question of who and where it was in the food chain. I mean, if you really want to get to the bottom of it and you really want to stop something like this from happening again, rather than jumping on the president, let's look through and figure out who is for sure to blame. Maybe it is him. Who knows? But we have to get through it step by step and see how this happened.
Can I step in with just a perspective on why this is important? Because I agree with Pete to some degree. People are going to look at this, especially if they, haven't paid much attention until day 8, because now it's cooked. It's like out of the oven. It's a cake. It's got some ingredients in it. People are paying attention more potentially. This has to do with a man who had an interim security clearance handling important information with our president in his presence every day. And if you'll hearken back to the Hillary Clinton scandal with Uma Abedin, her aide, walking into her home with her husband, who was messing as a pedophile at the time, and uploading classified documents on a laptop, it's that zone where people are able to be messed with and bribed. And you don't want those people next to your presidential candidates, and you don't want those people next to our president in the White House. And so that is the core issue. And there are a number of people on the staff who are still waiting for their security clearances. The White House has said the list is waiting on the process. That's fine. But with this particular one, domestic violence, Look at where we are with our
So
discussion
good
about
on the FBI for not granting that clearance in the way that they did. I just think it's plausible to think that throughout this process, your president and your chief of staff aren't digging all the way down into investigation for the details. He probably told his side of the story, which was a spin from him, which it would be, and they probably believed it.
We have
and that's how we
confirmation
got
of that. We don't have to say probably.
You know?
Yeah, I would just add to this that there is another element to it, and I understand what you're saying about people who are close to the president and security clearances and the importance of this. But I think there's a fundamental issue here, which is that the president of the United States is uncomfortable condemning domestic violence when he is asked explicitly. No, he is. Reporters asked him yesterday. He had the chance. He's very close to the narrative.
He's sensitive to people he believes being falsely accused
because of his own problems.
He wants due process. I think what he's saying is that a lot of people in this country have gotten frightened by the idea that there isn't necessarily due process every time. And that has pushed him possibly, I'm inferring, and I don't know this, to a place where he doesn't want to jump to conclusions. In this case, there was evidence. Whether or not he saw it, I don't know.
He watches TV
regardless,
all day.
This is a hot topic. And you can bet that when the White House daily press briefing starts, we think in about an hour, that this will be asked about. I do want to point out something else I heard you say on Fox and Friends a few weeks ago. The president has a lot of women, strong women around him. So for this to cook for 8 days is problematic on a whole host of different levels, too. Wonder what those conversations are like inside the White House with those strong women. Let's move. House Republicans now are hoping to seize on top House Democrat Nancy Pelosi's remark discussing bonuses resulting from the GOP's tax reform as crumbs. Will their strategy work? And make or break moment for DACA as the Senate finally opens debate on immigration. The president reportedly warning he will veto any bill that does not include his 4 pillars, his priorities. We'll talk about it. Stay close.
Fox News alert senators beginning the immigration debate after hours of partisan wrangling over the terms of the debate yesterday. First on the docket, a GOP plan from Senator Chuck Grassley and others that follows the White House framework. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell saying there is widespread agreement on the issue, but big changes must be made.
Keeping Americans safe does not need to be a partisan issue. And addressing these important safety issues along with DACA, border security, and other parts of our broken immigration system is our best chance to produce legislation that can pass the House, pass the Senate, and earn the President's signature. The longer my colleagues across the aisle refuse to come to the table, the longer they're unable to produce any legislation they actually support, the lower the odds that we can arrive at a legislative solution this week.
And Democrats are already vowing to blame the White House if no deal is reached. Shocker.
The American people know what's going on. They know that this president not only created the problem, but seems to be against every solution that might pass because it isn't 100% of what he wants. If at the end of this week we are unable to find a bill that can pass, I sincerely hope that's not the case due to the good efforts of so many people on both sides of the aisle. The responsibility will fall on the president's shoulders and those in this body who went along with him.
Meantime, President Trump today with a statement supporting the Grassley bill. As a new report says, the president is warning he will veto any bill that doesn't advance the reforms that he wants. This all comes as a second federal judge is barring the Trump administration from ending the DACA program next month. Jessica, I'll start with you because Mitch McConnell also said, why won't Democrats take yes for an answer? I thought that was a great way of putting it.
It definitely was. I mean, there are so many versions of this bill now. It gets a little confusing, you know. But the Grassley bill, I believe, has protections for the 1.8 million DACA recipients that President Trump, offered in the State of the Union. And what's going to be really difficult for Democrats going forward on this, if they said this is all about dreamers, then even though there's the $25 billion for the border wall and there's an end to chain migration, which I prefer to call family reunification, and an end to the lottery and e-verify and these 4 pillars that President Trump wants there, still, if you said first and foremost it's about dreamers, you're going to look a little hypocritical if you're then saying no to these other things.
So why
and
not
the House
say yes
bill
and
is even
claim
more
victory?
extreme.
I mean, why not say yes and just
because
say,
it won't feel,
look what we made Republicans do?
Because I think that fundamentally, I mean, the border wall was such a point of contention during the campaign. It was so difficult to stomach, and Democrats really made a huge deal out of it. So then I think saying, oh, okay, we said yes to $25 billion for this border wall that we've opposed from the beginning is going to be difficult. So
even though they called it a wall system, I mean, I thought the change in language gave them a little bit of room. When the president came out and he said openly, you know, we're not really talking about a wall, we're talking about a system. In some places there won't be a wall, and he like, you know, acquiesced on that point. I thought that that would give them the out.
Democrats, specifically Democratic senators, especially those that want to run for president, are going to play to their base, and they don't want to give a single thing to this president no matter what. But this is a very smart move by Mitch McConnell, because he's forcing Democrats to actually vote for things, or more importantly, against things like sanctuary cities. The party is so out of step with regular voters that they're going to be on the record time and time again for things that are dramatically unpopular, including I think this bill that the president's putting forward, which has a lot of common sense attached to it. They only want to vote for something they like. Of course, they need a majority to do that.
Remember what the president said? He said in the end, Americans, particularly Hispanic Americans, are going to love Republicans for what they can get accomplished. He said that not too long ago. I spoke recently with Alfonso Aguilar, who heads up the Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles, and he said, you know, he just harkens back to 38% of Hispanics voted for President Trump. And it isn't because what he tweets and what he says and all that. It's because of policies that they saw dealing with issues that were not going to be dealt with. And he said, we're not going to love everything about them, but at least some things will be settled.
Yeah, but Harris, here's the problem for the Democrats. They cannot allow this administration to be the administration that actually provides a path forward to citizenship for 1.8 billion people that are here, million people, forgive me, illegally. And so they can't allow that. And, you know, those are votes that they're afraid they will lose forever.
Well, they might have been able to if you didn't couple that with tax cuts, a growing economy, potentially infrastructure and other things. I mean, they're ticking down the things that are going to be difficult, Trish, this election year for Democrats.
I just think that they like, and I hate to say this, and I've told you this before, Harris, but they like the idea of the optics of all these people being sent out of the country. And you saw Chuck Schumer in that soundbite that Melissa referenced. He was saying it's going to be the president's fault. They want to be able to say, okay, Americans are shipping these people out, and it's all because of Donald Trump. Therefore, you need to go to the polls and vote for us in 2018.
New movement in the Russia investigation. Sources telling Fox News that President Trump's lawyers are putting together a case against an in-person interview with Robert Mueller. Can this plan actually work, or is a sit-down imminent? Plus, we're still waiting for the release of a Democratic memo responding to Republican claims of Obama-era abuse of surveillance powers. And now Democrats are accusing the White House of trying to silence them. But GOP Congressman Ron DeSantis says the Democrats have been planning this from the beginning.
He knew what he was doing. He wanted to get in this situation where he can accuse other people of trying to cover this up.
Democrats are pushing back on a request from the White House to revise their FISA memo in order to have it released. They say this is all one big attempt to censor the final version of the document before the American people see it. But Republicans say Democrats planned this all along. Watch.
To make any revisions to it. The only question is what redactions will be made. And obviously we'd like to keep those to a minimum. The White House has a different interest. I think their interest is in redacting anything that doesn't reflect well in the White House.
I think he wrote this specifically for the purpose of getting into this situation. He wanted to get in this situation where he can accuse other people of trying to cover this up. But I think it should be released.
Pete, your thoughts?
What matters in this situation is revelation of sources and methods. The Republican memo didn't include any, even though the Democrats howled about the fact that it would. It was released, it didn't. The reason intelligence agencies criticize the Republican memo is because of omissions, a lack of context. The Democrat memo, instead, was jam-packed full, so we're told, of sources and methods. So our intelligence agency said, don't release that until you redact certain portions that don't give away who we're talking to, where we're talking to them, what technology we're using to talk to them. It's common sense. Now, Democrats want to play this as a parlor game to make President Trump look less transparent. It's all process about hiding Russian collusion, all shady. Push as much as you can to the Democrat memo out there. It all confirms that the Obama team spied at some level on the Trump team.
Well, and it makes me question, Jessica, whether or not some of what was in that Republican memo is just not refutable in terms of facts for Democrats. I mean, the facts don't care about our feelings. They're not fungible. Right. They just are what they are. So you mix in some politics and some, methods and sources and all of that. And then you don't have to deal with the faxiness of it all.
The faxiness. I believe that there was a good amount that was completely accurate in the GOP memo. I think the Grassley memo also confirmed that. We do know that the Steele dossier was used in part to obtain that warrant to spy on Carter Page. We also know a lot about who Carter Page is, and, I hope that we will learn more also about what other sources the court had to corroborate what they found in the Steele dossier. I have no problem with that. I actually think that the GOP memo exposing that this all began with George Papadopoulos was a great thing for Democrats who are making this case anyway.
It also links to Hillary Clinton. But I mean,
that's fine. Yeah, Hillary Clinton paid for the Steele dossier. I am completely comfortable with that. The FISA court was apparently aware of the fact that it was a political document. They didn't know it was from the DNC and Hillary, but they knew it was politically motivated, and that's apparently par for the course. I want all memos out there. I don't know if the FBI is the answer to that.
How can you say that's par for the course?
That the FISA court has presented with political documents?
It's not par for the course that somebody hires a group to put together a memo in conjunction with Russia about an opponent that's then used by the FBI to spy on people.
Well, it's not just used. I mean, the way that the story goes.
The rest of it is the rest of it is fine. The fact that they did this is what is so threatening to our democracy, that you would have people for political reasons paying money, incorporating the Russians to write something in order to spy on a campaign. Carter Page, for all I care, he can go to jail. I mean, that's fine. Whatever you have about everybody else, this memo, I mean, the fact that they used this dossier at all, if it was so little, then why use it? Then why include it all?
Well, the way that I understand it is that Christopher Steele's reporting was coming in little bursts. He didn't supply that all at once.
Because he was lying.
Right.
Because he was a liar, and they got rid of him.
At one point, he wasn't even attached to the investigation officially any longer. Yet they continued to listen to him, as Melissa's pointing out. So you say it's coming in dribs and drabs. I'm paraphrasing what you said, little bits or whatever. But they're still using the information.
And it's unlawful to use unverified information.
But if you read this thing, I'll tell you, have you read this thing? If you haven't, I encourage you, because it reads like a giant piece of fiction that you would see in some kind of supermarket tabloid. This is the dossier. The idea that anybody in our administration would have taken that seriously. You can tell just by reading it that it's done with a vein of opposition research right there, very apparent, with a tabloid-esque kind of tone to it. And someone in our administration and the FBI would say, okay, this is enough for us to get a FISA warrant.
I don't think they said this is enough. They used it.
It's one of the things, and they never told anyone that it was opposition research.
Who was the former deputy director of the FBI, apparently, according to the Republican memo, and I haven't heard Democrats say that this wasn't true, said that if it were not for the anti-Trump dossier, they could never have gotten. Go ahead.
They never would have gotten that.
So that's what has happened here?
No, I mean, we never would have gotten the FISA document to go forward.
Vladimir Putin has accomplished what he wanted to accomplish.
It's also illegal to prevent unverified information to the FISA court.
But do you know that it's unverified? Do you know that there are
didn't have it verified.
I don't know if everybody caught that.
Yeah, Vladimir Putin accomplished exactly what he wanted to accomplish. He had his Russians feeding a bunch of garbage to Christopher Steele, who then goes and sends that back to the Clinton team and Fusion GPS, who then sends it to the administration, and all of a sudden, FISA warrants are being issued to investigate the Trump
cash over for it.
And we find out about it.
Who brags that he's a Kremlin advisor.
Cash over for that.
Yeah. So, in other words, the Russians had succeeded in all that disruption they wanted to cause.
Well,
moving on, sources telling Fox News that President Trump's legal team is now putting together the case against the president, doing a sit-down with special counsel Robert Mueller. Among their arguments, Mueller already has so much information from thousands of documents and dozens of interviews that there is nothing new that the president can give him. Also, there is no evidence of a crime that was committed. Where do you see this going, Pete?
Well, it's gone from a collusion case to an obstruction case from what we've heard and what we've seen publicly as it pertains to Bob Mueller. So what kind of questions is the president going to get asked? Did you obstruct? No. Did you obstruct? No. Did you do this? No. I don't know why you would submit yourself to that. All they're trying to do is get a trip up at this point. They're not seeking new information that they couldn't or wouldn't have gotten from people within his inner circle. I say, submit me written questions. I'll give you written answers back. I'll give you my honest answers back. But don't submit yourself to a session where you're going to get tripped up.
But Harris, wouldn't we get some kind of closure? I mean, that's the other thinking here, right? Like, once they interview the president, then it's sort of kind of done if they don't have anything at that point.
Well, we don't know, because we don't know what else Robert Mueller has in his investigation. I think it's too, I don't want to jump the shark on whether or not this closes the door. It generally speaks to things coming to more of a conclusion when you start to get people at the very, very top and then you reach the top. But because we don't know what they have, and that's the very reason why his attorneys have told him not to sit down. Look, they are trying and have been. We've been reporting for weeks that they are negotiating some sort of a way to make this work out. The president says he'd love to. He understands the political gain that he gets because the American people would love for this to be over, and they think if he sits down, it makes that leap. But you got to do what's best for your client, and that's what the attorneys are doing at this point. And you listen to the attorneys who are leading the case. And if this particular person can't give you something that anybody else can give you, then why don't you do what we as reporters do, and you ask a bunch of people and you get it in other ways.
Is it too easy for him to get tripped up, you think?
Yeah. I think we have no idea what's going on, because if you think back to the weekend when they went to interview Hillary Clinton over the email scandal, and we thought, oh boy, she's so worried, and they were going to have the lawyers and the whole thing, and here the decision was already made, and they had already written her exoneration and the whole 9 yards. So I don't think we have any idea what's really going on there.
That's a huge unknown for the president and his team.
Totally, and we know that he is very casual in the way that he speaks, which is the nicest way that I can say that. So, you know, a la conversation with Jim Comey, his interview with Lester Holt, where he kind of says things that he doesn't mean to be saying that people can then take and make a case out of. I think he should stay away. But adding to your point, Pete, there are actually 3 buckets that Bob Mueller's looking at. He's looking at money laundering from the Trump family and their businesses. He's looking at obstruction of justice and Russia collusion. So those are 3 areas that the president could possibly get himself in trouble with. So I absolutely agree, for his own sake, he shouldn't sit down with them and listen to his lawyers and stop saying things like innocent people don't have conversations, because there are a lot of good reasons not to talk to someone like Bob Mueller, even if you're not guilty.
Okay, you can file this one under unintended consequences. After Nancy Pelosi called bonuses resulting from the president's tax cuts crumbs, a Republican now swiping at the minority leader by pushing to make some of those bonuses tax-free. How smart is this move, and how much is Pelosi hurting her party, the Marie Antoinette of the Democrats? We are debating it next. See her.
The crumbs that they are giving to workers to kind of put the schmooze on is so pathetic.